Hi everyone, this is Vijayasri, Assistant Professor of MLR Institute of Technology under the Department of CSIT. In this session, we are discussing about the structure of C program. So coming to structure of C program, that is, it contains 6 sections: documentation section, link section, definition section, global declaration section, main function section. Main function section is again divided into 2 parts: declaration part and executable part, then subprogram section. Coming to first section is called the documentation section, which contains set of comments included name of the program. Like, let us suppose if my program is about addition of 2 numbers. I am performing addition of 2 numbers, sum of 2 numbers. Like, if I want to include the title of the program, then we'll go with the documentation section. Documentation section is also known as a comment section, which we can provide a title of the program. That means if some other person comes and suppose reads our code, then the person has to understand what the program is about. So we have to put this line in a comment section, which is ignored by the compiler. These lines are ignored by the compiler. The compiler won't read these lines. This is a single line comment. The comments are divided into 2 types: single and multi-line comment. Here I included only one line, so that I used a single line comment, 2 forward slashes. Like, let us suppose in my program I am performing all arithmetic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division and modulus. So I cannot include this in a single line comment, so that I am using a multi-line comment. Multi-line comment is represented with a slash star and then star slash. These are the lines ignored by the compiler. Why we are using this means, if some other person wants to check our code, that person are supposed to understand what the code exactly about. So this is about the documentation section, and whatever the lines we included in this section are ignored by the compiler. Compiler won't read these lines. Then coming to next section, second section is the link section. Link section consists of header files which contains function prototype of standard library functions. Link section contains all the standard library functions. That means the functions are already defined in the header file. Let us suppose here we have an example hash include stdio.h, where stdio.h means standard input output, where h is the header file. Let us suppose here I am performing sum of 2 numbers. Sum is equal to a plus b. So here I am giving a value as 2 and b value as 3. So that means these 2 values are the inputs which I am giving, and the compiler has to perform this sum is equal to a plus b, and the result must be stored in the sum. Then we have to print the result, print the sum. So the inputs are 2 and 3, which the user is providing. The compiler has to read. To read these inputs, we have to use a function called scanf. That means scanf is the input function. And then after doing a plus operation between the values 2 and 3, the result is stored in the variable sum. So it has to display sum. That means print sum. Print sum is the output, which we are using a printf function to print this sum. These 2 functions, scanf and printf, are already defined in the header file stdio.h, where hash is the preprocessor. That means this preprocessor directive is used to fetch the code of scanf and printf and includes in our program, so that we will perform scanf and printf operations on our code, where include is the preprocessor command, then stdio.h. std means standard IO input output, where h is the header file, and this is a predefined header file that must be included in the angular braces. Then these files are divided into 2 types: standard header file and user defined header file. Standard header file must be placed in angular braces. then user defined header files must be placed in a double quotes. These are the header files which already, the definition is already defined in the libraries, C libraries. Then coming to user define. So user can include his own code as a header file into his program. Coming to this example, hash include program1.c, where program1 is the file created by me. So I am including this header file into my program. So this comes under user defined, and whatever we are including in the Angular braces, those are predefined header files, or we can say it is a standard header files. Their meaning is already defined in the C libraries. Then coming to next section, it is a definition section which is optional. Like in this section, we define all the symbolic constants given to a name. Let us consider an example, hash define pi 3.14, where 3.14 is the constant value given to the pi, where pi is the identifier here. So whenever we are using in my program, whenever we are writing, let us suppose we are using 3.14 10 times. So instead of writing 3.14 10 times, we can write the pi. So the compiler automatically substitute pi value as 3.14. Then let us consider one more example, that is hash define max 50. So here max is the identifier which I am giving an constant value to that identifier is 50. So in my program, instead of writing 50 20 times, we can write, in place of 50, we can write the identifier name as max. So the compiler substitute 50 value in place of max. Let us suppose, think that I did not define. Now I am using a value 100. I am using a value 100. No, I am using the value 50. Let us consider 50 only. 50, 50, 50. Like that, I am writing for 20 times. Okay. Now I want to change the max value to 100. Now I want to change this 50 to 100. So how many times I have to write down, how many times I have to change the value? So here we have to change the value 20 times. I don't want to change the value 20 times. I'll change only one time so that it has to affect that value throughout in the entire program. So when we define hash max 50, then simply change the max value here 50 to 100. When we use the identifier max in place of writing the value 50, when you change the value, automatically max, wherever you will write the max in the program, automatically the value is substituted as 100 instead of 50. Next section is the global declaration section. This section is also optional, where the global variables are declared above the main. That means these variables we declared above the main, these variables are having a global scope. That means these variables can be used both in the main as well as user defined function. Let us consider here only. Here the variables are A, B, C, 3 variables which are considered as the global variables because they are declared above the main. So these variables can be accessed in the main scope. There we have a user defined function called fun1. It is a user defined function. In this function also we can use the variables A, B, C which are declared globally. That means these variables are having a global scope. We can use those variables throughout the program, both in the main as well as in the user defined function. Coming to this, let us suppose here I write main. Then I declare the variables int A, B, C, A, B, C, then end of the main. So these variables are considered as the local variables. That means these variables are having a local scope. That means these variables are alive up to this scope only. After this, the variables will not exist. The memory will get deallocated for that variables after this scope. So this comes under local variables. Then next section is the main function section, which is a mandatory section. The program execution starts from the main section, which is a mandatory. It is divided into two parts. One is the declaration part and the other is the executable part. Let us consider the same example, sum of two numbers. To perform sum of two numbers, sum is equal to a plus b. Give the values a as 2 and b as 3. Okay, these are the inputs which I am providing, and it has to perform this operation, and the result must be stored in the variable. So this is called the executable part, which it is taking the inputs of data type integer. So before that, to perform this statement, before that we have to declare int a comma b comma sum. This is called as the declaration part. And we are performing this comes under executable part. So all the variables that are later used in executable part, these variables I am using here. So this comes under the declaration part, and then the part contains the statement that are to be executed by the compiler. This statement is executed by the compiler and the result is stored in the variable sum. This comes under the executable part, and the program execution starts from the main section, which is a mandatory section. Then coming to next, subprogram section. This is an optional section, and then in this user can define his function. A subprogram section contains all user defined functions. A complete and fully function C program can be written without use of user defined function in C programming, but the code may be redundant and inefficient if defined functions are not used for complex programs. Let us consider here the function add, where add is the user defined function. If we want to write our own functions, we have to use a section called subprogram section after main. So in this we can define our own function, where coming to printf and scanf, these are considered as a built-in functions or a predefined functions, which their meaning is already defined in the header files. But here this is the user defined. User have to define his own function in subprogram section. Then coming to example, here consider an example of print hello world. Let us suppose this is a first program. Here if you observe, the program is about to print a hello world on the screen. So here I am using a comment called /*/. This comes under a comment section, which is a multi-line comment, or we can use a single line comment. This is a multi-line comment. This line is ignored by the compiler. Compiler will not read this line. Just we include the title of the program. Then we have a hash include stdio.h, where stdio.h, as I told you, it is a preprocessor directive. stdio.h means standard input output header file. That means printf and scanf functions are already defined in that header file. In this I am using a printf function to print hello world. So for that we have to, execution we have to include that header file. Then program execution starts from main section. Then I am using a printf function. In that I am writing hello world. So if we include this in printf, in our output screen we'll get hello world as the output, where this is the scope of the program. Whatever statements we are writing in the main function, that must be terminated or ends with a semicolon. Then coming to next example is find area of a circle. So here we all know that area of a circle is pi r square. Then so the title of the program is write a C program to find area of a circle. So I included that in a comment section, which is the title of my program. Then next hash include stdio.h. This is the link section, because here the input is R, that is 2, which we have to give. So whatever the input given by the user, the compiler has to read the input. To read that value, we have to use a function called scanf. After reading that, it has to perform area is equal to pi into r, where area of a circle is pi r square. It has to perform this operation and the result is stored in the variable area. To print that value, we have to use a printf function. These two functions are defined in the header file stdio.h. So we have to link that header file. So this comes under link section. So as we all know that pi value is 3.14, so that here I am defining a symbolic constant to the identifier called pi. So this comes under definition section. Then the program execution starts from main section. Main section, here R value is 2, where it is a input. So here I am giving R value as 2, that is a integer value. So here I declared R as int. Then area I declared as float, because area of circle formula is pi r square, where pi value is 3.14, which is a float decimal point. So here I declared the output, I'll get a point value. So I declared area as float. Then printf enter R, here R value is 2. Then we are using a scanf function to read that value which provided by the user. Then area is equal to pi into R. Already in definition section, I defined pi value as 3.14. So automatically the compiler substitute pi value as 3.14 into R, where R value is 2 into 2. So it performs where area is declared in the data type float. That means area value is 12.56, where I'll get a float points. So that I declared area as float data type. Then printf area is float data type, format specifier is %f, area. So if you observe in my output, in my test case, here we have a area is 12.5600. Yes. Then in this session, we discussed about the structure of C program. Structure of C program contains 6 sections. 6 sections, those are documentation section, then link section, definition section, then main section. Main is divided into 2, declaration part, executable part, then subprogram section. Subprogram section will write our user defined functions. Then we have discussed a sample C program also, that is area of a circle. This is about today's session. In the next session, we will discuss about data types. What are the data types in C programming? Thank you.